I was reviewing quarterly projections with my biggest client when my brother walked through the front door of my clinic like he owned the place. He didn't knock. He didn't call ahead. He just pushed past my receptionist, ignored the waiting room full of patients, and stopped in the middle of my office with his arms crossed like he was the one who had built everything around him. I looked up from the table slowly. My client, Dr. Hartwell, stopped mid-sentence. I said, "Give me one moment," and I smiled at Dr. Hartwell the way I had trained myself to smile when things were about to get very bad. Calm. Controlled. The kind of smile that told everyone in the room that whatever was about to happen, I had already planned for it. I hadn't planned for this. My name is Claire Sutton, I'm 31 years old, and I own a private medical diagnostics company called Meridian Health Solutions. We partner with independent clinics and specialty practices across the Southeast to provide advanced imaging and lab services. It took me 6 years to build from a single leased MRI unit in a strip mall to a company with 4 facilities, 43 employees, and contracts worth more than $12 million annually. My brother's name is Derek. He is 34 years old, has a business degree he finished in 5 years, and has never held a job longer than 18 months in his life. The last time I had spoken to my brother before that morning was at my father's birthday dinner 2 years earlier, when my mother announced in front of the entire family that Derek was going to be taking over our father's investment accounts, and that I should consider letting him manage mine as well. Since he had, and I am quoting her directly here, a real head for finance, unlike some people who got lucky in a niche. I had built a $12 million company. My mother called it luck. I told her politely that I had my own financial team. She called me selfish. My father said nothing, which was what he always did. Derek smirked into his wine glass. That was the last dinner I attended. Over the following months, the communication dropped off in the way it does when no one is willing to admit they were wrong. I stopped calling on Sundays. My mother stopped texting. Derek, who had never reached out to me for any reason that didn't involve money, stayed silent. I told myself I was fine with it. Most days I was. I focused on my company. I hired a senior operations director named Patricia, who had 20 years of experience running regional healthcare networks. I brought on a legal team. I secured a partnership with a hospital group in Atlanta that tripled our referral volume in 8 months. I was, by every measurable standard, doing exactly what I had set out to do. And then Derek walked into my office. I excused myself from Dr. Hartwell, asked Patricia to take over the meeting, and walked Derek into the small conference room at the end of the hall. I closed the door. He sat down before I offered him a seat. He put both hands flat on the table like he was about to chair a board meeting. I stood. He said, "I've been thinking about your company a lot lately. I think you need a director of strategic development." I looked at him for a long moment. I said, "Derek, what are you doing here?" He said the role would oversee expansion planning, investor relations, and new market identification. He said he had been researching the diagnostics industry. He said he had a vision for where Meridian could go. Then he slid a single printed page across the table toward me. It was a job description. His name was already filled in at the top. I did not touch the paper. I said, "You printed this before you came here." He said, "I knew you'd overthink it if I didn't come prepared." I asked him what his salary expectation was. He named a number that was 40% higher than what I paid Patricia, who had 2 decades of actual healthcare operations experience. I asked him what qualified him for the role. He said he was family, and that family looks out for each other. I said, "Derek, you haven't spoken to me in 2 years. He said, "That's exactly why we need to fix things. This is how we fix things." I told him I would think about it. That was a lie, and he probably knew it, but it got him out of my building without a scene in front of my staff and my clients. That night I called my attorney, a woman named Sandra who had been with me since the early days, and told her what happened. Sandra said it sounded manageable. She told me to send a formal written response declining the request and to document everything going forward. I should have known that was only the beginning. My mother called me 3 days later. This was the first time she had called me in over a year. She asked how I was doing. I told her I was fine. She said she had heard I was expanding and that she was proud of me. I thanked her and waited. Because I knew my mother and she did not call to say she was proud of me. She said Derek was really passionate about this opportunity. She said it would mean a lot to the family if I gave him a chance. She said our father had always hoped we would build something together. I said, Mom, Derek has never worked in healthcare. He has never worked in a company of this size. He is not qualified for the role he described. She said, Claire, you were never qualified either when you started. I told her that was not the same thing. She said I was being cruel. She said I had always made Derek feel small. She said that a woman who claimed to care about her community should be able to find room for her own brother. I told her I would not be creating a position for someone because they were family. She said, Then I don't know who you've become. The call ended there. 2 weeks later, my phone started ringing with calls I had not expected. A clinic in Savannah that had been in preliminary discussions with us about a long-term contract told me they were going to hold off. A specialist group in Birmingham that had been a reliable referral source said they were reevaluating their vendor partnerships. My operations manager in our second facility forwarded me a string of emails she had received from a consulting firm called Apex Advisory Group, asking pointed questions about our billing practices and regulatory compliance. I pulled up Apex Advisory Group online. The company had been incorporated 4 months earlier. The listed contact email domain matched a business address registered to my brother. I called Sandra immediately. She said, How certain are you? I said, Certain enough. She said, Then we start building a file today. I hired a private investigator named Marcus, who came with a recommendation from Sandra and a quiet reputation for being thorough. I told him what I had found and asked him to trace every thread. I gave him 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks I also kept running my company. I did not cancel meetings. I did not call my family. I did not respond to the outreach from Apex Advisory Group. I went to work every morning and I did what I had always done, which was build something worth protecting. Marcus came back in 11 days. Apex Advisory Group had been contacting 17 of our current or prospective partners. The messaging was consistent. Meridian Health Solutions was under informal review for potential billing irregularities. Nothing official. Nothing that could be traced to a regulatory body because there was no actual review. It was rumor, delivered with the language of concerned, designed to make our partners nervous enough to pause or pull back without requiring any evidence. Derek had also reached out directly to 2 of our clinic partners, presenting himself as a strategic consultant with knowledge of the company's internal operations. He had implied, without stating outright, that Meridian was going through a leadership transition and that it would be prudent to wait before renewing contracts. He had done all of this using a company that existed on paper and a title he had given himself. Marcus also found something I had not asked him to look for. One of the email chains he traced included a CC to my mother's personal email address. She had not just known about this. She had been copied on the outreach from the beginning. I sat with that for a long time. I had known my family was capable of pressure. I had known they were capable of guilt and manipulation, and the particular cruelty of people who believe they are owed something they never earned. I had not known they were capable of something this deliberate. I called Sandra and told her everything Marcus had found. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Claire, this is not just a family dispute anymore. What Derek did constitutes notorious interference with business relations and potentially fraudulent misrepresentation. We have grounds to pursue this. I asked her what pursuing it would look like. She walked me through it. Cease and desist letters to Derek and to Apex Advisory Group. Formal communications to every affected partner clarifying that no such review existed and documenting the false claims. And if Derek did not comply or if any damage to our contracts could be quantified, a civil suit. I said, do it. The cease and desist went out on a Tuesday. By Thursday my mother had called 4 times. I did not answer. On Friday my father called for the first time in over 2 years. I answered that one because my father calling meant something had finally broken through his silence, and I wanted to understand what. He said, Claire, your brother is scared. He made some mistakes. He's asking if there's any way to talk through this before it becomes something bigger. I said, Dad, do you know what he did? He said he had heard Derek's version. I said, he contacted our business partners and told them we were under investigation. That investigation does not exist. He made it up. He did it through a fake consulting company to make it look credible, and Mom was copied on the emails. The silence on his end was long enough that I thought the call had dropped. He said, "Your mother was just trying to help him." I said, "She helped him try to destroy what I built." He said, "You don't have to be so dramatic." I told him my attorney would be in touch, and I ended the call. The following week, Sandra sent me a summary of responses. 2 of Derek's outreach targets had replied to our clarification letter and confirmed they had found the original contact suspicious. One of them, a clinic director in Nashville named Robert Chu, said he had actually called our main line after receiving the Apex advisory message because something about it felt off, and that Patricia had handled it so professionally that it had, if anything, increased his confidence in us. Robert Chu signed a 3-year contract extension the following month. Derek did not respond to the cease and desist within the required window. We filed. The civil filing was not public in any dramatic sense. It did not make news, but it did reach the people who needed to see it, which is how things work in small professional communities. Within 2 weeks, 3 people who had been on the fence about partnerships with us reached out to confirm their interest. Apparently, a company willing to legally defend its reputation reads as a company worth partnering with. My brother hired a lawyer who sent Sandra a letter suggesting that the entire matter was a misunderstanding born of family tension and that Derek had simply been trying to help Meridian identify areas for growth. Sandra replied with 53 pages of documented evidence and a clear accounting of the business contacts made, the language used, and the timeline correlated to Derek's initial request for employment. Derek's lawyer did not send a second letter. The settlement came 6 weeks later. Derek agreed to dissolve Apex Advisory Group, issue written corrections to every contact who had received the misleading outreach, and pay a sum that I will not specify except to say it covered our legal fees and then some. He signed without a counteroffer. I was told he did not fight it, which told me everything I needed to know about how much he had actually believed in what he was doing versus how much he had simply expected me not to fight back. My mother sent me a text 2 days after the settlement was signed. It said, "I hope you're satisfied." I read it once and put my phone down. I thought about what to say for most of that evening. I thought about the years I had spent building quietly while my family dismissed what I was building. I thought about every Sunday call I had made while they treated my work like a phase. I thought about the birthday dinner, and my mother's voice when she said the word lucky, and the way my father had looked at his plate instead of at me. I didn't text her back, not because I was angry though I was, but because there was nothing left to explain to someone who had seen all of it and still chose to call it luck. Patricia knocked on my office door that Friday afternoon and asked if I had a minute. She sat down across from me and slid a folder across the desk. It was a preliminary proposal for 2 new market entries in the Mid-Atlantic region. She had been working on it for 3 weeks without my asking. She said, "I figured after everything you could use something to move toward instead of something to move away from." I opened the folder and started reading. The projections were good. The market analysis was thorough. The timeline was aggressive but not unreasonable. Patricia had identified 2 potential acquisition targets that would give us an immediate operational footprint without building from scratch. She had already made informal contact with one of them. I looked up at her. I said, "When did you have time to do all of this?" She said, "You run a good company, Claire. Good companies are worth protecting and worth growing." I wanted to do both. I thought about the moment, 2 years earlier, when I had been choosing between 2 candidates for the operations director role. Patricia had been the more expensive hire. She had also been, unambiguously, the right one. My gut had told me so, and I had listened to my gut, which was the thing my family had always told me was my weakness. That I trusted myself too much. That I moved too fast. That I thought I knew better. I had known better. I approved the Mid-Atlantic proposal in principle that afternoon and asked Patricia to begin formal due diligence. I called Sandra to let her know we would be expanding and would need updated corporate documentation. I called our CFO and asked for a revised growth model that incorporated the new targets. I did not call my family. I had spent a long time being the person in my family who didn't need to be protected, which had somehow become the same as being the person who didn't need to be considered. I had been overlooked and underestimated. And then, when I had made myself impossible to overlook, I had been targeted. I had learned something from all of it. Though not the thing my mother thought she was teaching me, I had learned that the people who are most threatened by what you build are almost always the people who decided a long time ago that they deserved it more than you did. And I had learned that the most powerful thing you can do for yourself is simply refuse to agree with them. Not loudly, not with a speech or a confrontation or a moment of dramatic vindication. Just quietly, consistently, every single day. By continuing to build. Meridian Health Solutions expanded into Virginia and Maryland 18 months later. We now operate 11 facilities across 5 states. Patricia was promoted to Chief Operating Officer. Robert Chu from Nashville sent flowers when we announced the expansion. He included a card that said he had believed in us from the beginning. My brother has not contacted me since the settlement. My mother sends a text on my birthday each year. I reply with 2 words. Thank you. My father and I have not spoken. I don't describe any of this as winning, because winning implies the other side had a legitimate chance. What I have is something quieter and more durable than a victory. I have a company that was worth fighting for, and I fought for it, and it's still standing. That is enough. That has always been enough.